people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of the Serrano rematch's collapse, Katie Taylor herself took to her social media and stated, "Let's get it done, Eddie Hearn. This homecoming has waited long enough.
Arena Dublin is available.
So let's give Ireland a night to remember. On May 20th, let's go, Chantel Cameron. Happy to move up and wait for the opportunity to become a two-weight undisputed champion." As you can imagine, Chantel Cameron, who's wanted this fight for as long as I can remember, I've actually had the pleasure of speaking to Chantel Cameron on more than one occasion, and she was always very pessimistic, always very skeptical as to whether or not she'd ever get the chance to share the ring with Katie Taylor. And on many occasions I spoke to her, she said she didn't think it would ever happen.
While I was a tad bit more optimistic.
The recent collapse of what was supposed to be the Serrano rematch, Amanda Serrano suffering an injury en route to that second fight with Katie Taylor. I'm going to be honest, I would prefer that Amanda stay at featherweight.
Maybe it's selfish.
Amanda Serrano has paid her dues, fluctuated up and down in weight for years, looking for opportunities and world titles to claim. And at this stage in her career, where she's making very good money, and she's made history again.
She already made history for being Puerto Rico's first 7-division champion.
More recently, she made history for a second time by becoming Puerto Rico's first undisputed champion. First overall, first in the 4-belt era.
I do feel like she deserves a break.
I would actually prefer that Amanda stay at featherweight because her presence at that weight gives it a profile that it really never had before.
It's not the first time I've said that. I want Amanda to stay at featherweight. I want her to continue to reign as that division's undisputed champion. When it comes to this fight between Katie and Chantel,
this is a prime example of what I'm always telling you guys and why there are those out there who rate Katie Taylor above Claressa Shields, even though Claressa to the eye seems a more dominant fighter than Katie. It's because the talent pool is a lot deeper where Katie campaigns than where Claressa campaigns. Case in point, a fight fell through with a top-tier, top-shelf fighter in Amanda Serrano, and just like that, there was another top-tier, top-shelf fighter available. Not just any champion, an undisputed champion, another one.
It's not a knock on Claressa.
But if you wanted to understand and wrap your mind around why it is that so many people rate Katie a little bit more highly than they rate Claressa, it's because Katie campaigns at deeper weights that have that many more fighters and that many more challenges than where Claressa campaigns between 154, 160, and 168.
130, 135, and 140. It's a deeper talent pool.
A lot deeper, so much so that Claressa and Katie, in spite of having debuted as professionals the same year in 2016, Katie has fought 22 times.
22 to Claressa's 13.
And I have no doubts that if Claressa could have fought 22 times like Katie, she would have. But the reality is, there just ain't that many girls up there to fight.
It's not Claressa's fault.
But the reality is, there just ain't that many girls up there to fight.
You say that Katie Taylor sometimes looks a lot more human than Claressa does in the middle of a fight, and it's because she's fighting better fighters.
You'll find better fighters at 130, 135, and 140 than what you'll find up there at 154, 160, and 168.
That's where that sentiment comes from, whether you agree with it or not.
That's what it is. Katie Taylor will spare no expense and leave no stone unturned. This fight between Katie and Chantel has been years in the making. It didn't always necessarily have the profile that the Amanda Serrano fight had, because Amanda's been an established name in the sport for years, whereas Chantel...
It took time for her to build herself up, but she's finally done that. She is the super lightweight division's undisputed champion. She's coming off a dominant victory over Jessica McCaskill, who gave Katie Taylor a lot of problems years ago.
Years later, you can make the argument that Chantel beat beat her easy, though the same thing can be said in reverse when it comes to Ana E. Sanchez. Yet another common opponent between Katie and Chantel. When Chantel fought Ana E. Sanchez, she struggled.
She did, but when Katie Taylor fought Ana E. Sanchez, she beat her easy.
Katie Taylor's got speed. Chantel Cameron's got power and size.
She's been campaigning as a super lightweight for quite some time now. By now, she's fully acclimated to that weight.
They both come from respectable amateur backgrounds, and they're both precision fighters. They're both good at a lot of things.
They both are.
No reason to believe that Katie Taylor's going to have it easy opposite the ring Chantel Cameron. There really isn't.
Chantel's a quality operator, and she's a quality operator with a mean streak. She packs an authoritative punch, and she has mobility, agility, just like Katie Taylor.
Just bigger, albeit slower.
Chantel Cameron currently ranks in at number 4 on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. Katie Taylor herself, she's seated at the top at number 1.
She's reigned atop the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list for some time now. She's been up there a while. Her reign is under threat.
You have to wonder at this stage that at 36, going on 37 years old, she's not biting off more than she can chew opposite the ring. A quality operator, an undisputed champion like a Chantel Cameron. You've got to give Katie Taylor credit. She don't shy away from a fight.
Any fight with any fighter.
History awaits the winner. It awaits Katie Taylor if she can become a 2-time undisputed champion.
It awaits Chantel if she can give Katie Taylor her first professional loss, her first recorded loss on her own home turf, her own home soil. Don't forget, this is supposed to be Katie's homecoming fight.
Safe to say the crowd's going to be behind Katie.
If Chantel is to stand any chance of beating Katie Taylor, she's got to be dominant. She's got to make it decisive.
She's waited a long fucking time for this moment, and now it's here.
As they say, the show must go on, and for Katie Taylor, the show does go on. It's very soon. She will be opposite the ring, Chantel Cameron.
Not a bad substitute at all.
In men's lightweight news, Gervonta Davis had this to say ahead of his upcoming fight with Ryan Garcia. He says, it's boxing ability.
Right.
What are you going to do when you get hit?
It seems a valid enough question because Shakur Stevenson, he is what you would call a defensive specialist, a pure boxer.
Hit and not get hit is his speciality. And it does seem a valid enough question that what's he going to do the day something gets through? He said he didn't even have power at 126.
130? None of that, said Davis to Morning Combat. How can you stop people that can actually hit?
Thus far, what Stevenson ostensibly lacks in power, he makes up for with supreme boxing ability. Even when asked to deal with the relentless pressure of both Oscar Valdez and Jeremiah Nicotila, the 25-year-old boxed circles around them, leading to wide decision wins on the judges' scorecard. Still, despite Stevenson proving that he doesn't need to be the biggest puncher in order to get the job done, Davis continues that in a sport as violent as boxing, his chin will be tested. When that ultimately happens, Davis has one succinct question for his budding rival.
What's that?
All that boxing, you're gonna get hit. What are you gonna do when you get hit?
And as stated, it's a valid enough question. Can Shakur Stevenson deal with a shot, a hard shot, if one gets in?
It is an acid test of sorts in the sport of boxing. Can a guy deal with a hard shot? Because something's bound to get through at some point, though.
Gervonta Davis was mentored for a long time by a guy who tends to lean more towards technique and tactics and strategy. He was mentored by a guy for a very long time who was more of a Shakur Stevenson than a Gervonta Davis.
More of a precision guy than a puncher. You know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd, for a long time, he wasn't big on power the same way that Shakur Stevenson's not big on power. Floyd did have power, knockout power at the lower weights, but as he moved up in weight, he lost it on the way up. Tack on.
He had hand issues too.
But he did all right in spite of not being a very big puncher. He did well for himself, very well for himself. The same can be said for Andre Vard.
He wasn't a big puncher neither. Not at 168, not at 175, but he did all right.
Did well for himself, very well for himself. Shakur Stevenson seems to go into a fight with an emphasis on hit and not get hit. An emphasis on defense. He is a defensively minded, fundamentally sound fighter, a pure boxer, a capable one.
His focus seems to center around mitigating damage while inflicting it. Hit and not get hit.
You're asking what's going to happen the day that he does get hit. Well, he's a harder guy to hit with a knockout shot, a knockout punch, than somebody else. I mean, that's a pretty...
It's a generic question. You can ask anybody that.
Because it applies to anybody. It applies to everybody. You can ask any pugilist that laces the gloves up, what are they going to do the day they get hit?
The difference between Shakur and them is that he's much harder to hit.
Gervonta Davis is asking this question ahead of what is to be his fight with Ryan Garcia. Ryan, who is not viewed as being as fundamentally sound a fighter as Shakur Stevenson, not as proven. Shakur Stevenson is, in fact, a two-division champion. He has competed at that level, at 126, at 130. Now he's moving up to 135.
They talk about this kid like he's some kind of prospect or some kind of contender, but what you're looking at is a two-division champion, a very young one.
Albeit a very young two-division champion, but he's proven himself more at more weights than Ryan Garcia has. Ryan never proved that he really is the top.
The best in show at 135 or the best in show at 140.
He hasn't. And that question is a question you'd sooner ask a Ryan Garcia than a Shakur Stevenson, because Shakur Stevenson, if nothing else, has proven himself to be a hard man to hit.
In general, he is more proven than Ryan.
Not actually expecting that Gervonta Davis will ever share the ring with Shakur Stevenson.
He's not.
I mean, I'm not getting my hopes up. But if they ever do, I heavily favor Shakur Stevenson to win that fight because of the stylistic advantage he possesses over a Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis is a skilled counterpuncher to some degree.
He can punch to some degree.
But don't overstate his power, because he didn't knock out Isaac Cruz, and Isaac Cruz, he don't box on the level of a Shakur Stevenson. Quite the opposite. Isaac Cruz comes barreling forward, looking to press the issue and press the action. He's looking to stand right in front of you. And that's what he did opposite the ring, Gervonta Davis. And Gervonta couldn't knock him out.
That guy's not hard to find in the ring.
And Gervonta couldn't knock him out.
Nowhere near as defensively responsible.
And Gervonta couldn't knock him out.
The guy's not the technician that Shakur Stevenson is, and in spite of him being as aggressive,
as come forward a fighter as he is, Gervonta didn't stop him opposite the ring of faded Yuriorkis Gamboa. Gervonta Davis needed 12 rounds to stop that guy. Guy who was standing on one good leg, just one good leg, because he suffered a torn Achilles tendon in the match. These guys,
they're not the technicians, not the tacticians that Shakur Stevenson is.
They don't have his height. They don't have his length. They don't have his speed or his technical ability. The fact that Shakur Stevenson is a southpaw, just like Gervonta Davis.
Well, that's one advantage Gervonta won't have.
Those southpaws, they can be tricky. Can be hard to deal with to an orthodox fighter, but Shakur Stevenson, he's a southpaw, the same as Gervonta Davis, with a stylistic advantage. Where Gervonta Davis is looking to land counter shots, capitalize off his opponent's mistakes, and land hard punches, Shakur seldom makes any.
This is not a guy you're going to catch leaning over his lead foot, lunging in, overcommitting to his punches.
She's not a guy who leaves his chin in the air the way Ryan Garcia does.
Hey, Rolly Romero did when he was stepping into that 1-2 when he shared the ring with Gervonta.
His technical errors and defensive lapses in judgment, that's the opposite, the exact opposite of what you get from a Shakur Stevenson. What you get from him is a lot of situational awareness.
Don't forget that he's a younger fighter. He's a younger fighter than Gervonta Davis. He's coming into his prime.
Tack on that he's a taller fighter than Gervonta Davis, a somewhat longer fighter who has speed of his own. He can safely box Gervonta Davis comfortably from the outside as Gervonta tries to close the distance.
Shakur manages it.
And maintains it, pecking away one shot at a time at what is the shorter, stumpier fighter who needs to get mid-range to the inside before he can land anything.
The only advantage Gervonta Davis would have over Shakur Stevenson opposite the ring of him is power. But power can be worked around. We've seen that a million times.
Especially when you're not a prolific puncher. Like Gervonta Davis ain't a prolific puncher. Gervonta throws one shot at a time looking to get the guy hurt. He don't pour it on until he does.
It's 1 and 2 shots at a time. Just 1 and 2 shots.
Waiting for the other guy to make a mistake. What if he doesn't?
Don't try and convince me that Gervonta Davis has fought somebody like Shakur Stevenson, because he hasn't.
Shakur has faced more big punchers than Gervonta has faced pure boxers.
Oscar Valdez, Nicotila.
Those guys can punch. Those guys hit hard. Now you tell me, what pure boxer has Gervonta Davis shared the ring with?
I'd heavily favor Shakur Stevenson to UD Gervonta Davis. A wide unanimous points decision if they were to ever fight. But alas,
they're not going to. So all of this has been much ado about nothing. And just in keeping with the theme of all things Gervonta Davis, Marquise Johns at New York Fights says, sorry, Gervonta versus Ryan is big, but not a super fight.
A contention we've often expressed here on the channel that while this is one of the bigger fights you can hope to make in the postmodern era of boxing, it pales in comparison to the fights of old.
It's no Maypac, I'll tell you that. It's not even on the level of Mayweather versus Canelo.
It's not.
Let me answer the first question mentioned. Is this a legitimate super fight? By definition, not at all. From what has been made public, the battle is at 136 pounds. As much as the sanctioning bodies are proving to be useless, there isn't a WBA 136-pound belt or any stakes outside of who will win. Not even a regular title at the weight. Labeling this as a super fight is misleading. A big-time fight, just not a super one. That leads me to answer the second question, as this fight is easily the biggest one out there.
We don't know that yet.
The quote-unquote belts don't matter crowd is right in this aspect. Not even close. Regardless of weight class or titles, Davis and Garcia are currently boxing's biggest draws.
No, they're not.
Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua draw more than the both of them in the United Kingdom, and here in the United States, neither Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia draw more than Canelo.
They're not boxing's biggest draws.
I don't know, maybe you can argue that Gervonta is the biggest draw at lightweight. You could argue that, and that Ryan trails right behind him. Maybe you can make that argument compartmentalized.
But neither Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia are the biggest draws in boxing.
That title is neither proven nor earned by either of those guys. I mean, Gervonta Davis, he's been on pay-per-view 5 times. He's had 5 separate pay-per-view appearances, and not a single one among them has cracked 300,000 pay-per-view buys. And Ryan's never even been on pay-per-view.
When gauging how big this fight is, it certainly seems like a bigger fight than, say, Ruiz versus Areola or Ruiz versus Ortiz, the upcoming Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez fight. I would say comfortably that this fight is bigger than those fights.
It's bigger than Spence versus Thurman, I think. I think the both of these boys have more fanfare than Keith Thurman.
What about Errol?
What about Errol? When's the last time he fought? And when he fought, when's the last time he cracked 300,000 pay-per-view buys or over 300,000 pay-per-view buys with a box office fight?
When's the last time that happened?
It seems to me that he hasn't been able to duplicate the success he had opposite the ring Mikey Garcia with most any and every box office fight he's had thereafter. He didn't do it with Sean Porter, he didn't do it with Danny Garcia, and he didn't do it last year with Yordenis Ugas.
What's the point of all of this?
The point is that Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis, at least to me, seems like a bigger fight than, say, Spence versus Thurman. I do think this fight is bigger than those aforementioned fights, though I don't think it's bigger than, say, Canelo versus Golovkin.
It's not that big.
Every single time those two guys met each other in the ring, they brought in a little over 1 million pay-per-view buys. Here and now, it's unclear as to whether or not Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis can bring in those kinds of numbers.
And with a little over, 7 weeks to promote the show and sell it?
Stefan Espinoza very recently stated they're looking to do it at either the T-Mobile Arena or Allegiant Stadium. Apparently, they haven't decided yet.
If you can believe that.
This is a numbers game, and the numbers are what tell the story. What they generate at the gate with those that are in attendance, and what they generate at the box office with those that buy the pay-per-view. In order to fully know how big this fight is compared to other big fights.
Now, I don't care how you personally feel about it or what your personal preferences are. Ultimately, the numbers that the fight generates,
that's what'll tell you how big the fight is or how big the fight ain't.
This is a numbers game.
Numbers at the box office and numbers at the gate. That's what tells the story.